are to be constructed in this area. Often they might be 2 stories or split level, so the 10-meter height would allow that, just the same as in the other low-density residential areas. In terms of public engagement, public hearing would be held, and prior to that, written notice would be sent to landowners and neighboring property owners, identifying the date and time of the public hearing. In addition, because this land use bylaw amendment is being initiated by the city, administration is recommending some additional engagement with the affected landowners and neighbors in the form of a virtual meeting, maybe in mid-March, so that those owners and surrounding neighbors could ask questions and find out a little bit more about the proposed amendment. And this would mean that we need sufficient time between the date of first reading and the public hearing. That input received at the virtual meeting would then be summarized and presented at the public hearing. And of course, as usual, landowners and neighbors could certainly speak at the public hearing as well. So just in summary, the decision before council tonight is to amend the R3 modular home district to add detached dwelling on any parcel within the identified plans and any future parcel created on those plans as a permitted use. And the recommended motion is that council give first reading to bylaw 400.33 as presented, and that council schedule a public hearing for 5:30 p.m. on Monday, April the 12th. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Manager Hackett. Just for clarity, I want to make sure I heard you right. So that is the area immediately to the south of Terrace School?
Sorry, yes. My apologies.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I misheard you or if you didn't say north, but just so we don't lead anyone astray that's watching online. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sure. I move that council give first reading to bylaw 400.33 as presented.
Thank you very much. Anything else from anyone before we proceed? And we'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Ross is in favor as well. Online, thank you everyone. That is passed unanimously. Councillor Claddock.
And I would so move that council schedule a public hearing for bylaw 400.33 at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, April 12th, 2021.
Thank you. Anyone have any objections to that date? Anything else? No. All those in favor? And that is unanimously carried as well. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 5.3. The intermunicipal development plan between the city and county, and our ICF committee report. Chief Gowdy, would you care to take that item?
Yes, I would. 2019, the province of Alberta passed a modernized municipal government act, and one of the requirements therein was to complete an intermunicipal collaboration framework with your neighboring municipality. There was also a requirement to complete an intermunicipal development plan with municipalities that contiguous borders. The city of Lacoma and Lacome County already had an IDP in place, most recently completed in 2017. To support the development of the IDP, or the Intermunicipal Development Plan, the city and county had previously passed and created or passed resolutions in support of creation of an Intermunicipal Development Plan Committee made up of elected officials of the city of Lacome and Lacome County, supported by administrative staff from both municipalities. The Intermunicipal Development Plan is limited, or was previously limited, to the consideration of shared land use planning and development issues, and really dealt with things like how to ensure that compatible development would occur on the periphery of the community where it was near another. Under the Modernized Municipal Government Act, the ICF requirements expanded this shared mutual interest provision to include any services that were provided between the two municipalities or within the intermunicipal region. We went through the intermunicipal collaboration framework regulations in detail over the last few years, and most recently council passed the ICF with Lacome County in the fall of 2020 as required by provincial legislation, or I should say as originally required by provincial legislation. there has been an extension granted to the ICF requirements in contemplation of the challenges many municipalities faced in achieving those deadlines, particularly in light of the COVID pandemic. So the City of Lacone did use the Intermunicipal Development Plan Committee as the vehicle for negotiation of the intermunicipal collaboration framework. And what you see before you is a terms of reference that really just enshrines that in your own legislation as a shared committee. So it's one of the most cumbersomely named committees that I've come across, but it does fulfill both the purposes of the IDP and the ICF. And so we have proposed terms of references for the City of Lacone and Lacone County Intermunicipal Development Plan / Intermunicipal Collaboration Framework Committee. The same terms of reference have been passed by Lacone County at their February 8th meeting. And these mirror the same agreements that they have with some of their other urban partners within the county. Open to any questions or comments. We do have two members that are both your IDP and ICF representatives here tonight. Mayor Grant Creasy and of course Councilor Talia Hibbs.
Thank you, Chief Cuddy. So before we get into this item, if anybody's got any questions or concerns, I wanted to say that it was certainly a pleasure to work with the other members of the committee, and certainly for those from the county, given that we only have one bordering partner that takes in the entire city. I guess I really have nothing else to base that comment on, but I do talk to many other mayors from across our province who do not have the same rapport with their neighboring municipalities that we do. So I am very thankful and grateful for that, and it's been a pleasure coming up with a document that I think serves the citizens of our area best, as opposed to only the county or only the city. So once again, just want to make that known publicly that the entire process certainly took some time and there was some give and take on both sides, but overall it was a very pleasant experience, and glad that the vast majority of it is taken care of. There will always be room for updates and tweaking the agreement, but overall I think that it was a great process, and special thanks to our CAO Gowdy for doing an awful lot of work behind the scenes before the committees, along with Manager Timmons. An awful lot of work was taken care of, and all we had to do was, I'm going to say more or less rubber stamp it. Sure, we had some discussions and whatnot, but there was a lot more work that went into it than what was specifically done during the formal meeting times. So thank you for that. Councillor Hibbs.
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. Actually, one is actually what CEO Gowdy referenced, the cumbersome name. I'm hoping that when we're talking about it at this table, that we can just say intermunicipal committee or something, like when we're making committee assignments, so whomever happens to sit on that in the future. And yes, it does make sense that you would put those two together because they're obviously very complementary to each other. And going forward, they won't be overly onerous as far as very time consuming, I don't think, for meetings, again, for whomever happens to be assigned to that committee in the future. But yes, it has been a very good experience. It does continue that excellent relationship, and solidifying it like this, hopefully will just make that easier going forward, because you do have a framework, you do have a process. So yeah, it was awesome to be part of.
Any questions or comments regarding the agreement itself from anyone? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council approves the proposed terms of reference for the City of Lacome and Lacome County Intermunicipal Development Plan Intermunicipal Collaboration Framework Committee.
Would you care to repeat those titles, please?
I was gonna move that, but it's been hard, yeah.
Oh, shit.
Any additional input from anyone? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? It appears to be unanimously carried. Thank you, everyone. And similarly, we have the Joint Economic Area Agreement, item 5.4. Chief Cuddy.
Thank you. So one of the items of discussion and agreement in the intermunicipal collaboration framework was the need for some further updating of specific agreements or sub-agreements of the ICF. One of the most important agreements between the city and the county is the Joint Economic Agreement, or what's proposed to be updated to be called the Joint Economic Area Agreement. This was signed in 2007, and I can remember at that time, it was groundbreaking and one of the, not the first, but one of the very early pioneers of these joint economic agreements between counties and urban municipalities. Largely came out of some of the difficulties that we're seeing actually in the city of Red Deer County relationship and what was developing at that time. So in 2007, the councils of the day signed an agreement wherein they basically specified a specific area and said anything within, any new development within this area, revenue will be shared between the county and the city. And the revenue share, the apportionment of the ratio would be 30% for those areas that have no municipal services provided, so that means water and sewer, 40% for those areas that have one service provided, and 50% for areas that have two services provided. Currently, just so that you're aware, there are no areas within the county which services are provided for which the city receives that benefit. And to date, the city has received approximately $250,000, again, through that 30% ratio of new development within the region. In 2017, after completing the intermunicipal development plan, the city and county engaged in further exercise, which was a servicing study for the area identified within the intermunicipal development plan. This would ensure that water and sewer could be provided for the entire region. The costs were apportioned fairly to benefiting parties, and that no area was stranded and unserviceable. The cost was significant, around $250,000, I think between $250,000 and $300,000 for that analysis and engineering study. But was largely borne 80% from the Alberta Community Partnership Grant from the provincial government. And that has been one of the hallmarks of success of having a successful partnership with the county, is that over the years we have been successful not in just providing shared services to residents in the region, but also to accessing funding from outside the region to bring into the region. Following the 2017 intermunicipal development plan, there was an identification of water and sewer servicing availability for a greater region than had been contemplated in the original 2007 Joint Economic Agreement. And consequently, the two municipalities agreed that there would be the need for a follow-up amendment to that 2007 agreement to expand the area to include the new regions that were eligible for water and wastewater. That commitment was reconfirmed, I guess, in the passing of the ICF. And subsequently, we went about the exercise of updating the agreement. The agreement that you see proposed today, I would say, has two substantial changes to it. Number one is that for simplicity, the city has, or the agreement has a proposed change to the variability of tax sharing ratio. One of the things that came up during the ICF discussions was the county had a concern, a legitimate concern, that purely sharing the gross revenue from an area at 50-50 actually disadvantages the county in that case, because there's no contemplation of some of the costs they have for servicing the area. So clearing snow, replacing pavement, a lot of the sort of surface servicing that you would see. So there was a lot of different scenarios discussed, or different ways to calculate it. And ultimately we came to an agreement to remove 25% of the revenue, consider that the surface servicing costs, and split the remaining 75% down the middle, equally between the county and the city. So this results in the city sharing equally, or sharing in 37.5% of all development, rather than the 30%, 40%, and 50% that was eligible under the 2007 version. The second large change is that there is an expansion of the area suitable for water and wastewater servicing, and thus for the sharing of taxes from the county to the city. An increase of approximately 3 additional quarter sections and a couple other remaining parcels. We are recommending that this be endorsed this evening, and the county has endorsed it again at their most recent meeting. I think one thing that I found really interesting, of course, with the county actually proposing this to their council first, you get an opportunity to review the presentation from their administration to their council. And so I had gone in and I was interested because I really felt like this was a real win for the city to get this additional area, simplified agreement, and actually a higher percentage of the tap sharing for everything that exists under the current agreement, and marginally different, I guess, in the future for the other. And so I was interested how they would present it. But when you look at the presentation from their administration to their council, they actually see it as a win for them too. And when you go through their thinking, they're correct. It is a win. It is a win for them. And it is a win for us. And so I still look at it and say, actually, this is a great improvement for the city of Lacome. But what's really great is it doesn't come at the cost of our partners, Lacome County. They also are walking away richer than they came sort of to the table with. And so I'm just really happy how this has worked out, and I'm happy to endorse it and say I really do recommend you move ahead and execute this agreement.
Thank you, Chief Cuddy. Councillor Gullickson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just have a quick question regarding the parcel of land up on north along Highway 2, where it junctions with Milton Road up there.
Yes.
That piece isn't adjacent to any city property. And we talk about the utilities going into that property. But would those utilities be under our jurisdiction? Would they not just be coming off the regional line?
So at that time, at the original time of the 2007 JEA, there was a consideration, I think, of a shared service area there. And so it was contemplated that servicing would come out of the city. And so it was or town, actually, sorry, at that time. The regional water would have just been created. So it was constructed in 2006. This agreement was signed in 2007. And at that time, the province was very strict on the number of outlets you could get from that regional water line. And so it wasn't foreseen that Lacome County would be able to get a dedicated sort of tap off at that location, and that they would have to come from the city. Now, to be honest, there's not a great reason for that area to be serviced in the near future, but we didn't want to see it removed in the new agreement, just in case there is development.
So my other question would be, would the area in between the city and that be up for annexation then into the city?
Well, just so it's not to confuse anyone, annexation and this agreement here really have no two
separate
separate
things.
things,
Yes,
right?
exactly. I'm just saying that it seems strange to me that a part of this agreement would be not bordering onto the city. That's all.
I don't think that anybody in the room would necessarily disagree with that. However, this was a piece that was in there for many, many years, and no one saw really the benefit to removing it, so it stayed in. That's really the only explanation that I can offer. I don't, other than what Chief Gowdy went through. But you're 100% right. It is kind of an island unto itself out there, and the idea that the city is going to service that piece, I would suggest, is extremely far in the future.
Well, I know that at one time there was a talk about a Fly J going in there at one point.
There's a few different options, yes.
Yeah, and if they went in there, would we be obligated to run water and sewer out to them as part of the agreement?
There is no obligation for you to run water and sewer out.
Okay.
That would be the county's responsibility if they were so interested. In, specifically to that item, later on in your mailbox, actually, there is a message from the province that they're looking at a different location, actually, for that commercial.
Yeah, I thought that one was done, but I mean, there is opportunities for other commercial ventures there, and I just don't want us to be obligated to run that water and sewer from the city out to that location.
Right, and we are not, but appreciate you making that public so people understand it. Thank you.
Good.
Councillor Conick.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So for my own clarification, and so the 30-40-50 split is no more, it's just getting. Okay, so that's the tax option there of one. Do we have any idea what that new amount of tax will be for 2021? I mean, maybe you don't know. Is that a ballpark?
So, given that once this is ratified by both
Yeah,
councils,
yeah.
then it will be no more, and we'll move into the,
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
new system. But I think it's gonna be within a very low percentage of exactly what it is now. It's just a far easier methodology to calculate it and seem like a more fair and easier way to administrate as well.
No, that's fair.
Chief Gowdy?
So I believe the number is right around 45,000,
Okay.
38,000, so it is very similar.
And then just for my own clarification, I know we ran the water underneath, and it's in that on the west side there now.
Yes,
But did it come back underneath and now the track on 2 has services too, or not yet?
not yet. The county is looking at that as a very strong possibility to bring it south of Highway 12.
Okay, because I thought I saw guys working now, and I thought maybe they had already gone underneath.
They, I believe, are putting casing under there, but are holding off on putting the actual live services until they're ready to hook up.
Okay, no, I was just curious. That's good. Thank you.
Chief Gowdy?
I just had one comment. You had mentioned annexation is different, but I think one of the important things to remember here is that while this agreement is in place, the city agrees not to make applications within the JEA. So that is point number 24 of the proposed agreement, and it exists in the 2007 agreement as well. And so there is, the city, it doesn't bar you from ever annexing the lands. You need to give a 1 year's notice that you're going to discontinue the agreement in that area. But there is some curtailment of your annexation ability by signing this agreement. I just want to.
Appreciate you mentioning that, because I did have one business owner that alluded to that possibility, and I wasn't sure of the exact numbers, so now I'll have a place to reference that so they know exactly where it's contained in the agreement. So yeah, two very, very separate and distinct things, and appropriate that's addressing here so that no one is under any misunderstanding, so thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you. I'll just move that the city of Lacome and Lacome, that the city of Lacome and Lacome County Joint Economic Area Agreement be approved as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Ross, just want to make sure I hadn't missed you. Any questions are good, thank you. Does anyone have any additional comments or questions? If not, we will entertain the motion before us. All those in favor? And that is unanimously approved as well. Thanks, everyone. Next item up is 5.5, our line of credit bylaw 486. And looking at the screen, I believe we've got Senior Manager Reyes with us. Mauricio, are you with us? If so, item 5.5 is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. Good evening, Council. I am pleased to present a request for decision recommending that Council give a second and third reading to bylaw 486, line of credit. As all of you know, over the last years, we have been carrying a line of credit that is $3.5 million. And basically, it's a safeguard to be used whenever the city cash balance falls below the minimum, we can use it. And in fact, in 2020, we used it a few times as the city extended the tax deadline from June 30th to December 31st. However, I would like to remind Council that the city has approximately approximately $20 million in both in portfolio investments and cash in the bank on average at any given time. So there is also access to investments whenever needed. Finally, I would like to mention that upon adoption of bylaw 486, the previous bylaw 478, which was adopted in 2020, will be repealed. Now I'm open for 20 questions that council may have.
Thank you, Manager Reyes. Anyone? Councilor Konik?
I would just move that council give second reading of bylaw 46, line of credit as presented.
Thank you. I'm not seeing a bunch of hands up here. So I think we can let you off the hook on a bunch of questions for this second reading. Anyway, Manager Reyes, I will call the question. All those in favor? That is unanimous. So, second reading is passed unanimously. Councilor Gullickson?
Thank you. I'll move that council give third reading to bylaw 486, line of credit as presented.
Thank you. Equal amount of comments, so we will go straight to question as well. All those in favor? And that is unanimous as well. So second and third reading, that brings it into effect immediately. Another, what I'm going to call housekeeping issue is taken care of. And we can move in, well, we've got Manager Reyes here. Our item 5.6, the Supplementary Assessment Bylaw 485. Mauricio, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy.
Oh, one moment, if I could just interrupt, sorry. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So Manager Ray has said that the other bylaw will be repelled. So we don't have to make a motion to have that done anymore, like, or are they going to be sitting on the books and then they'll be cleared up down the road, or what's the procedure now?
Very good question. Chief Cuddy, would it be appropriate to have a repeal at this point in time or no?
No, excuse me. So actually, if you go to bylaw 486, the actual bylaw itself of what's proposed for the line of credit, number 5 does include a repeal of bylaw 478, which is the previous.
Thank you for bringing that up though, because it would seem odd when we're in the midst of getting rid of a lot of cumbersome paperwork on the books to yet create some more, but in fact that was taken care of in what I'm going to say, a much more intelligent fashion that it was included in the original motion. Thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So just a question is, and rather than going through this process annually, why can't we just amend it annually rather than going through first, second, third reading each time? It just seems kind of, isn't there a simpler way of doing it without being repetitive to administration?
Thank you.
Still need 3 readings.
Manager Reyes, would you care to handle that, or Chief Cuddy?
I can. Manager Reyes and I haven't always agreed on this particular item. Both Manager Reyes and his predecessor and the predecessor before that are of the opinion that an annual is required, an annual pass of the line of credit. I have thought before that I think a 5-year, the one every 5 year, but it hasn't really gone beyond that, and I've always deferred to the expertise of our certified accountants, which I continue to do today. We can look into it a little further if that's council's desire and get an official opinion from municipal affairs. That's no problem. We can do that and see if there is a more streamlined way to do it.
I think that most council would be interested in knowing that. Perhaps it's a question of should the amount differ or something like that. Maybe that's the time, or a maximum year length, whatever the case may be. But yeah, it's given that motions require the 3 readings, it's a little repetitive for sure.
You know, I if I may, Manager Reyes, was there anything else? Was there any, I really gave my side of the thing. Was there any support you would say for why it's better policy to do it annually?
I would say that only if the amount needs to change, perhaps we would have to bring it annually. But again, as you mentioned, we would have to check with municipal affairs to make sure that we can do this for a period of time. To be honest, this bylaw says that it it goes for 3 years, I believe, for 3 years. So I don't, to be honest, I would say that if it is going to go for 3, perhaps there is no need to bring it until the time comes that we have to renew the bylaw.
Everyone's good there? Did we have a motion on the floor? No.
We passed it already, we're on to the next item, aren't
We're on the next item.
Well, that's what I mean, that's on that one, though, because we kind of backtracked
we?
here.
Yeah, we backtracked with it.
Okay. So we're into supplementary?
Yeah.
Item 5.6 and the supplementary assessment bylaw 485. Manager Reyes?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I am pleased to present a request for decision recommending that council give a second and third reading to bylaw 485, supplementary assessment. As you may recall, the city levies taxes twice. Once is done in May, and that is for the general taxation. And the second one comes from the supplementary assessment, which we typically send notices early in the year. Supplementary assessment reflects the increase in value of a property during the tax year, and it's basically related to new construction that happened during the year. Supplementary tax typically raises about $60,000 to $70,000 a year in additional tax revenue, but of course it varies depending on the construction activity that occurred during the year. I am now open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councilor Jacobson?
I move council give second reading to bylaw 485 supplementary assessment.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay then, all those in favor? That is unanimously passed. Councilor Jacobson?
I move council give third reading to bylaw 485 supplementary assessment.
Thank you. Similar input I expect. Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that is likewise passed unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it, Manager Reyes.
Thank you.
Director Juke, we appreciate your patience. The last up here on request for decision is the report number 4, committee's review. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. Tonight, administration is presenting the third in a series of council committee review reports. Council and the public viewing tonight may recall that these reviews of committees, boards, and commissions began in 2020 and are driven by the council strategic goal number 4.1.1, which is open and accessible government, and this is strategy C. Overall outcomes for the reviews will be that the committees and boards formed by the city will understand their roles and fulfill their mandates and provide value to residents. Administration is including agencies supported by the city to which a council member is appointed with the same, applying the same outcomes as a way to make the review comprehensive. Two other features of the reviews I'll just mention as a reminder, they're noteworthy. The first is that the membership of the committees or boards are surveyed for their input prior to completing the report on each committee, with the results summarized in the section on the committee in the report and in full detail as an attachment to this report for the first time. A second additional feature of these reports is that we apply an IAP2 lens to the committee's function. IAP2, to remind council, stands for International Association of Public Participation, a way of measuring public participation and promoting its use worldwide in governance structures. General information on IAP2 spectrum is in the end note to this report, which happens to be on page 13 of the report. But each of the committees is viewed through the spectrum, and it's felt to be an important aspect of measuring their services to Lacome. So tonight, council and the public have the full report in hand, which this time reviews Lacome Regional Tourism Marketing Association, an external agency, and the Lacoma District Recreation, Parks and Culture Board, and the Heritage Resources Committee, which are both council committees formed by bylaw. As well, there's a covering RFD, which further condenses the review into a synopsis for each of the groups, almost one paragraph. The verbal part of this presentation will rather skim over it rather than going into great detail, and just touching on each group and then focusing on the options that we've identified as ways to amend the city or the city's involvement with the committee. Sorry, to amend the committee or city's involvement with the committee. In the past, I've paused after outlining the options that council can consider as ways to amend the committee itself or the city's involvement with it. And if council likes, we can provide a thumbs up or a thumbs down on each of the option if that's okay to do again. So to start off, we'll examine Lacone Regional Tourism and Marketing Association, or LRT for short. The LRT is, in fact, one of the independent external agencies that we've included in this review because of its importance to service provision for the city. This association is incorporated under the Societies Act of Alberta. It has its own bylaws and staff. The LRT provides tourism and marketing services to the city and to the county and to its business and nonprofit membership, focusing on, of course, the region's attractions, events, and businesses. They host a website designed to serve the public, all the usual social media channels, and they connect us to the Central Alberta Tourism Association, to Travel Alberta, and to the province as a destination management organization. They also informally provide comparatively high volume visitor information services at their Flatiron offices on the main floor. That location, just incidentally, is an extension of the original interpretive center concept that was more fully realized in the past when the Historical Society and the LRT were one organization, virtually. Council appoints one councillor representative to the LRT, to the board, and meeting hours total about 10 per year. The city also contributes a manager liaison, cash funding in the amount of about $56,000 in 2021, which is about the same as the county's funding. It's a little more. And we additionally provide about $16,000 worth of office space and utilities, again, in an equal share initiative with the county over there. So it's about $32,000 for the offices at the Flatiron. Finally, the city spends about $16,000 in support of events that the Lacome Regional Tourism and Marketing Association coordinates for or with the city, including events like Light Up, Canada Day, and Culture and Harvest Festival. So stakeholder input survey was interesting with this group because, again, they're independent groups, so it was interesting. They did respond well. They do overall, I believe, show a focused group, and I'm just going to summarize, again, very, very high level about their stakeholder input, just some key points. The full details of the group survey can be found in the report. It's an attachment, and it's starting on agenda page 77, just for your reference. So with this group, over 80% of the members were between somewhat and very certain about their roles on the board and in the community. More than 66% felt their work had a significant positive impact in the community. And the board overall considered its resourcing from the city to be adequate. On the IAP2 spectrum, this group is fully empowered by the city to provide tourism services. Tourism services is commonly a municipal function. To some degree, it's a staff person, most commonly like economic development officer off the side of their desk. In this case, we have fully empowered our agency to do this for us. They make independent decisions with the funding that we give them and with the resources that we provide. And again, the city does not otherwise engage in tourism as a municipal function. Options to amend the city's involvement with this group identified by administration include ceasing to appoint a councillor to the board and or replacing a councillor appointment with a member of administration. And at this point, I'll take any questions the council may have on this part of tonight's report.
Thank you, Director Duke. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Director Duke. This board and organization has, in the past few months, more so this, I was up late this past month, has undergone a very comprehensive review on the organization and the direction. We are currently advertising for a new coordinator. There is a awesome, passionate group of board members right now that is very diligently taking on a lot of responsibilities during these restructuring times. And the passion of the direction is to attract tourism from the outskirts while also supporting our membership. I think our membership is approximately 47, and the goal is to expand that and support that network as well. There's been some challenges, without a doubt, but the board consists of the Chamber and Historical Society, a few members at large, and Councillor Paula Law from the county, and myself. And at this time and in the future, I think it would be it's imperative, I think, to remain the board as is with the direction moving forward. And there's some, how do you put, a more aggressive direction to supporting our businesses and working together with the Chamber and Historical Society and the county and the whole region as a whole. So I'm very strongly advocate that we continue this relationship, and the city's also had Guy Lapointe as an advisor, and I think there's a lot of passion, direction moving forward that hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months gets redirected and moving forward in a very new way and some positive input moving forward. So that is, I'm a representative on that one. I think it would be yeah, it would. I think this is one area that there's needs to maintain its where we're at today.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. The only question I have is I noticed in the write-up, it says that the association minutes are kept but not formally submitted to council. And I guess I would reiterate my point that I've made probably numerous times, that if we're going to have a committee that a councillor or a member of council sits on, minutes should be being provided by that committee. And they should be included in the mailbox. In this case, not only do we have council representation on that committee, but we also provide a sizable portion of the funds that they are operating on. So even more reason for that accountability. So I guess that would be my only comment, is just reiterating again that these committees must, in my opinion, provide minutes for the public, for the council to see, but also for the public to see.
Thank you. Director Duke, are you aware of the justification for those minutes not being forwarded from this particular group?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. We have some requirements for minutes to be submitted, I believe, in the terms of reference of the committees that we form. When it's an independent agency like that, it's not typically the case that we require their minutes. I believe that, however, that Councillor Hibbs' recommendation is a good one, and it's perfectly feasible.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. But I guess as a follow-up question, whose responsibility is it then to get the minutes to the mailbox? The councillor rep, or will city contact them?
I would suggest that that is not the responsibility of the councillor appointee to the board, given that there is a staff member there, I'm assuming, to take minutes, but I remain corrected.
On this committee, that is not the case. We do pass on those requests for minutes that we get from council. Unfortunately, when it is an independent agency like this, if they are unable or choose not to submit those minutes, we have nothing to pass on to council. So we'll certainly reiterate the request, and I think they'll probably be happy to submit them, but that doesn't always happen as consistently as we would like.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I can pass it on to our board that upon completion of the meeting that they be forwarded to both, to be equal to the funding partners that they'll be forwarded to both the county and the city.
It's an interesting situation with a separate board like this. I don't want it to appear as if it's Big Brother watching on them. It was genuine interest on behalf of council that we would see these. I don't foresee this being a monumental thing to address. So if you could look into that for us in one way or another, we would appreciate it. Director Juke.
Thank you. Certainly can do. Yes. Does council want to give us any input on the particular options? Recommendation from administration is that council accepts the review of the Lacome Regional Tourism and Marketing Association as information. However, there are two options there that council can also consider. I can restate those if you like.
So, Councillor Hibbs, given that it is perhaps somewhat of a departure from the current relationship with the Lacome Regional Tourism and Marketing Association, would it be best to incorporate that into or amend that into an existing agreement, or how do you see that being handled? Or is it just a question that we ask them to forward them? Do you want it as part of the paperwork agreement?
Well, I would think ideally it would be added to terms of reference, but at minimum it should be requested, and I would assume that they would probably acquiesce, because there's no real reason not to be honest with you. But exactly. I mean, if it really became push comes to shove, you don't want to have to go there, right? So I would say a nice friendly request would be the best way to handle that, in my opinion.
And just to be, and I think they will, I think you're absolutely correct. We've never received any pushback from the group or saying we don't need to share minutes or anything like that. It's just been a matter of sporadic submission. And so we can also follow up a little bit better than we have when they're not coming. And I'm sure we can correct this gap quite easily.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council accepts the review of the Lacome Regional Tourism and Marketing Association as information.
Okay, so we're going to keep the request then rather informal. That's okay, very good. Anyone else? All those in favor? Very good, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Moving on now to the Lacoma District Recreation Parks and Culture Board. Again, just in my brief introduction to this report, I mentioned that this is one of the two true council committees that we have on deck tonight. This was formed by bylaw 46 back in the 1980s, I think 84 if memory serves. Its purpose is to develop a broad range of rec and culture services, facilities, programs, parks, and green space for the community, which is a very broad mandate in terms of comparative to other groups. And further, this board is a formalized engagement arm of council, providing a platform for both city and county residents and groups to provide input into council decisions, into the board's decisions, which then inform the board's recommendations to council. This advice function is also captured in the bylaw in the board's terms of reference. In this way, council collaborates with the board on its decision making. The board recommends on new projects, recreation rates and fees, funding, and in-kind support for community projects, and on applications to the Community Builder Partnership Fund, which is a significant fund that council set up that gets supposed to, by policy, get $50,000 a year and to build up to provide a ready source of funding for community projects. But council also empowers this group to issue city-funded rec and culture grants and approve in-kind support for rental assistance for a total value of about $30,000 in 2021. Council makes all the appointments to this board. Currently, this includes 1 councillor from the city. And meeting hours total about 12 per year as the group meets every other month, currently virtually. In 2020, the group had a lot more work to do because there was more happening to respond to COVID-19. So there was quite a bit of back and forth emails, a larger load than in most years. The city also contributes a manager liaison to this group and an administrative assistant. Both of these people do a significant amount of administrative work for the board and carry out many of the actions that the board requests or advises or decides on. The all-in budget for the rec board in 2021 is $33,500. And that does not include the community builder partnership funding amounts. Stakeholder input from the group showed a well-functioning group. And again, this is just a skim over top. There's greater detail in the report, starting on the agenda page 87. But just to give you some highlights, over 80% of the members felt the board worked well together, that each of the members worked well together. There are 9 people on this group, and they are county and city residents. Almost all the members considered the board's resourcing to be adequate. And I just want to highlight one comment in response to the survey. When asked about most memorable achievement, one member said, it's more of a continuous behind the scenes support that we provide to the city. Rec boards are a fairly common vehicle to use by many municipalities. They don't always work well, but ours does and has for many years. On the IAP2 spectrum, this group is working at a hybrid collaborate, empower level, mostly at the collaborate level. They make a few independent decisions about funding and resources, but mostly they bring public input into council decision making. And there's value there in many ways, not just informing council's decisions for as much as council wants to credit the input, but also that there's an opportunity for the public, another opportunity for the public to meet with a group and provide their input and ask for things. Options to amend the city's involvement with this group, or to actually, amend this group identified by administration include substituting a member councillor representative. And this is not recommended as the councillor brings information about recreation, parks and culture services into council and also helps pre-align the board recommendations to our council strategic goals if possible. We could also replace the councillor appointment with a member of administration, but that may overweight the committee with administrative representation because the current administrative assistance is quite hands-on. And of course, thirdly, to mention that there's an opportunity for council to simply dissolve this board. It's formed by bylaw. It can be dissolved quite quickly and easily. But again, this is not recommended due to the significant public input and the city-county collaboration that the board provides. So I'll take any questions council may have at this point.
Thank you, Director Duke. Recreation, Parks and Culture Board, any questions or comments on that one? Anybody interested in making a motion? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council accepts the review of the Lacoma District Recreation, Parks and Culture Board as information.
Councillor Gibbs?
I just did have I don't know, it's not really a question, I guess it's a comment, sort of. Just under the responses, I noticed it looks like about 6 people participated in this section for this board. But on one of the questions where you actually answer, like leaving a long answer, there's only 2 answers. And one of them for Q9, if you could change anything about the committee or board you would be on now, what would you change? And the first comment is less influence from the city and county council members on the board. I just found that a little bit, I don't know, unnerving, I guess, because it's a board of essentially of 8, I believe, plus the student rep. So, you know, the council members are the minority on that. It's not like, I mean, you're meant to be part of a board to be vocal, and I should hope everybody is vocal. I don't know, I guess I guess that comment just kind of bothered me a little bit, because, and it's not, that's just that board, that really could be any of these boards that we sit on as, you know, council representatives kind of thing, I don't know, so I guess I just wanted to highlight that as something that we need to, in case somebody would catch it, sort of be aware of, I guess, so, and that goes for all of us.
Yeah, certainly an interesting comment. I think that perhaps could be misconstrued by some, that given that it's, most meetings are, in normal years, are occurring in this building, and there is several members of administration there for support and whatnot, so I guess from the outside it could appear that is being overly influenced, but voting members, that is really not the case, as we can clearly see from it, so
yeah.
It's an interesting comment, I think. But who was up first? Councillor Jacobson, go ahead.
Sure, I sit on this board, so yeah, I concur with all the recommendations here. I think, yeah, everything here is good. Just to speak to Councillor Hibbs' comment, I'm pretty sure I know what that comment was about. And just to give you some enlightenment, so Reeve Law is the county representative to this board, and her and I tend to see, we have discovered, quite eye to eye on financial matters and how things, you know, should be run from that perspective. So there's been several occasions over the last 2 years when either budgets or financial matters come up for recommendation, where both the Reeve and I have been the minority of the opinion initially, but have spoken, you know, in favor of what our opinions are should be, and that has led to probably some of the more lively discussions. And in fact, our recommendations have ultimately always been accepted. So I can see perhaps how some individuals might view that as a minority of an opinion having more sway. But I have no idea if it's because we are the government representatives or it's just because we spoke more persuasively on the issue. But that I'm quite sure is what is being referred to there.
I think that could certainly be one positive part of having our representation there, is to perhaps lead some of these discussions where there are significant financial consequences from those decisions, to try and get decisions that are generally going to benefit the community, rather than having ideas that are maybe not quite aligned show up at council and be rejected at that point. It seems like a tremendous waste of time and energy on behalf of the board. So I can see how some could feel that way, but I happen to agree with what you've said, and that's
exactly. And I think the Reeve and I both feel that that's our role, to represent, you know, what the government's that we both represent perspective on these issues would be, frankly. Right. So yeah.
Councillor Cox.
I'm just curious, there's like 9 members on this board. Is there a particular reason why there's so many? Or is that just a historical? You know, I don't know.
Chief Cody?
That is just a function of bylaw 46. So I don't know that I can say what the reason for such a large membership is, but I think just to get a broad spectrum of the community's input, I would guess.
I think we're pretty fortunate to have like you said, a very wide array of interests in the community when it comes to these issues. And Councillor Jacobson, would you suggest that the board has been ineffective due to the size of the committee, its membership, or?
No, my feeling is frankly almost the spirit behind rec board in general is what motivates so many different types of people to sit on it. There's, you know, they want a youth representative, they want someone from here, someone from there, right? So that more than any other board, there is a raison d'etre behind it, if you'll forgive my expression, that really wants to include as many as possible. So I think that's why you see that.
Good. Chief Gotti?
I had said a bit hastily that it's from bylaw 40, the original bylaw 46 from 1984, but actually I just went and that particular part, the board makeup, part of that bylaw was amended in 1984, so after it was passed, then 1987, then 1989, then 1989 again, then 2002, and then 2012. So, and then 2015, actually, looks like. So it has been reviewed a few times. I still can't give you the exact reasons, but it looks like that's been reviewed a number of times over the years.
So who had made a motion? Who did?
Cora did.
Councillor Hoekstra. Given that I didn't remember who made the motion, I would have our legislative coordinator read that one back. Please, Denise, have you got that one before you?
Yes, I do. The motion was that council accepts the review of the Lacome and District Recreation, Parks and Culture Board as information.
Thank you. As moved by Councillor Hoekstra. Anything additional from anyone? I do not see any. All those in favor? And that is unanimously approved as well. Director Juke, let's continue on to the Heritage Resources Committee, please.
You are muted, Director Juke. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Lastly, we'll examine the Heritage Resources Committee, or the HRC. This committee is another true council committee set up by bylaw 397. Its purpose is to administer the city's Heritage Resources program, enabled by the Historical Resources Act, which is a provincial act. I'll speak more about that in just a moment. The committee's mandate is set up in the bylaw, and it's important to note it is responsible to support council's direction on heritage resources in the city. Council receives its powers from the act and delegates them over to this particular committee. Services provided include advice and recommendations to council on heritage resources identification and designation, conservation of heritage resources and related permits, plus public engagement and education. These are largely collaborative activities. The board is also empowered to issue grants from the city's Heritage Fund. This is an annual, there's annual budget to this fund with unused amounts saved in a reserve. Going into 2021, the reserve balance was $20,000 and the annual budget amount this year was $10,000, which is more than in prior years. But the HRC board chair asked for a reduction in their other funding. So the same amount in total has been contributed. Council makes all the appointments to this board as well. Currently, this includes one councillor and members of the public, and a representative from the Historical Society of Lacone. Meetings are about 3 hours and held on an as-needed basis. The city also contributes an administrative assistant, and most of the work generated through the committee involves commensurate support work from the planning and development department. So the committee's work is tied quite closely with city administration. Stakeholder input survey showed a functional group with potentially some needs. 75% of the members felt the time required for board activities was about the right amount. Half the members disagreed when asked if the board's resourcing from the city was adequate. Additional details about this group survey can be found in the report starting on the agenda page 97. So just speaking a bit more about the inadequate resourcing. In the past, the administrative assistant to this board was a member of city, has always been a member of city staff, but that person was also on the Historical Society board and contributed a considerable amount of own volunteer time to both entities. And so when that person was no longer working for the city and the administrative assistant was replaced, we scaled it back to the usual, which is agenda preparation, minute taking and minute drafting and so on, just basic administrative support functions. I believe that in the case of this group, they may be missing some of the former support that they were getting. On the IAP2 spectrum, this group is fully working at a hybrid collaborate empower level, just like the rec board, mostly at the collaborate level as well, because they mostly make recommendation to city council. They do make a key independent decision with grant funding, so that's their empowerment. And they do bring public input into council decision-making, with most of the membership being citizens, including the representative from the Historical Society. Options to amend this committee identified by administration, there's only two. The first is to, of course, cease appointing a councillor representative to the committee and replacing that person theoretically with a member of the public. This is not recommended, as the councillor helps ensure that the recommendations generated by the committee into council are consistent with the city's position on specific issues as required by the bylaw. And again, that's there because of the powers conferred to council by the Act. We could also increase the resources to this committee potentially. If council is interested in investigating this, administration would collaborate with the committee, find out what it is they're really looking for or missing, and bringing the matter back to council, or simply assigning, for example, some managerial liaison to the committee. We have a new manager of planning and development who has experience with with heritage resource committees, and so she may be of assistance to them. At any rate, I'll take more questions that any questions that council may have on this part of the report.
Thank you, Director Juke. In your report there on the last point, the last bulletin under the summary, you recommend that consulting with the committee members further and returning the matter to council for additional information. Do you still stand by that recommendation?
I do, if only to just feel out what it is they're potentially missing, and seeing how we could fulfill that need if possible, which may require bringing it back to council for resources.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobson.
Sure. I've been waiting to talk about this committee ever since we found out that we were going to be doing this committee reviews. I guess I would disagree with the manager Juke just in one regard. I really don't see any reason for a councillor to sit on this board moving forward. I was involved in this board before I was a councillor briefly, when it was still the Heritage Resources Steering Committee. And I believe they did excellent work back then in getting all of the properties that were open to being designated, into the catalog and getting that database all built. What I've seen this board do in terms of a practical function in the last 3.5 years is really just administer some grants. As when it comes through, there's been the odd designation that happens, and that's kind of the big thing. But even those applications have trailed off dramatically. My objective view is that the people who are involved in this, they're very much like stamp collectors or train hobbyists. It's a very niche type interest. And to be frank, I believe that their assessment of the importance of their work vis-a-vis the entire community's interest in them is a little bit inflated. I believe it's extremely important work. Lacoma has great historical buildings and work needs to be preserved. But I have not seen anything in 3.5 years that would lead me to believe a councillor needs to be on this board at all. And I'm sure I'm going to get roasted by them at our next meeting for saying this, but it is my honest assessment of the situation here. Yeah, and I don't at all agree with the feedback from them that they are adequately supported from the city in what they do. They are very adequately supported in what they do. There is ample budget for what they do. And I believe that the board really does need to deeply take a look at what its function is and what it should be moving forward if it's to remain relevant in the city and for the city budget. So those are my thoughts on that. I'll make a motion later on if there's any more discussion, but I'll leave it for now.
Thank you. Well, I, for one, certainly appreciate your frank comments. That's the only reason that we improve things, is being open and honest with one another. And are there any avenues that you can see where this group could perhaps be more effective for the community? Or given that a lot of these properties that were on the backload for designation and whatnot have been taken care of, are we past the useful life? What's your opinion?
Well, I think what they have ultimately evolved to do, or what their actual activity has been in the last year and a half is what their value is. Like, there are very good projects that have been applied for funding to retain their historical character that have been completed, and those provide excellent value to the community. And to have a committee of volunteers who are very interested in historical buildings and have that interest. There are some very good board members who have excellent qualifications, even like PhDs, frankly. So to have that board to be able to adjudicate, grant submissions and to disperse that is a very good asset to have. But the whole operating component to it, this was discussed in the last budget this last year of switching their operating money to more just grant disbursement, right? The operating component, yeah, again, I don't see any need for that, or I certainly don't see any need to certainly increase city staff commitment, that's for sure. Yeah. And then when I think of what my role as a councillor has been, when I compare that to the rec board, for example, I don't know that I brought any value, frankly, to the Historical Society in terms of their discussion and that, other than just someone else there talking. In terms of my role being a councillor, I don't see any value for that. So yeah, to answer your question, Mayor, what I think their value is to simply look themselves in the eye and say, this is what we're doing, and it's good work, and this is what we should be doing, because that is what we are doing, if that makes sense.
Sure, and then certainly valued work, just that you don't necessarily see it being appropriate that there's a member of council on that committee.
If the whole point of this exercise was to evaluate any committees that don't need a councillor to sit on it, so that there are either more opportunities for equitably dispersed council involvement in some of the heavier burdened committees, or free up time for something else that may come along, I would, using that criteria, I would not say that this meets the threshold for requiring council involvement.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I have a question just about the history of this committee, because it's set up in 2015, but yet some people are saying they've been involved with it more than 8 years. So maybe I missed with Director Duke's summary what really happened over the last while, or has it only existed since 2015?
Chief Gutty?
I don't believe it has only existed since 2015.
No.
I think that the original start of this was earlier, around the turn of the century. There was the Heart of Downtown plan that the city undertook, and I think this was all part of it, the creation of the places of interest list, the creation of a municipal heritage designation program. And so if I recall, that was sort of like 2002 to 2006. Director Duke, do you have those actual dates by chance?
I'm astonished to find that is not in my report. And off the top of my head, I can't recall either, but I do agree that it's about 2006, thereabouts.
So perhaps someone either misheard or misspoke in that it was in existence for more like 15 years, not since 2015. Was that a likely scenario?
Again, I believe the last bylaw amendment was as recently as 2015. That seems to ring a bell. Okay. I'm surprised that that's not in here. My apologies to council. I'm looking online right now.
In any event, it apparently has been in existence for closer to a couple of decades, as opposed to 5-6 years, that kind of thing.
That's
that helps. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I do understand Councillor Jacobson's comments. A grant process might be simpler for administration and council. in no way I'd want to see a group of volunteers to hold the brakes on their passion for what they're putting into the community, but I would do support sometimes to simplify it for both administration and council might be. But I also see quite a few synergies between Heritage Resources and the Historical, because I think between those two organizations, there will be some projects coming forward that may require city support and some direction there in the future. So I understand that. Yeah, the Historical Society was going to have some plans in the future that I think may be of interest, that they may have some synergies together. So thank you.
Director Juke, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just to clarify, it is the case that the bylaw is dated 2015 and it's referencing plans created in 2013. But I believe also that CAO Gowdy's comments about earlier iterations of the group are accurate as well. My apologies.
Pizza's there. She didn't hear that though. Councillor Jacobson, you had said earlier that you wanted to make a motion.
Yeah, I apologize, Mayor. I'm just thinking about that because I don't know if I want to at this point like make a motion that mandates the change in scope for the committee. But I do definitely want to put the motion out that council remove the councillor appointee and replace with a member of the public. So I think I'll just put that there for now. So I will make the motion that that council. It'll make a motion that council will direct administration to consult with the Heritage Resources Committee regarding the scope of its mission for the future, and also replace the council representative with a member of the public.
Thank you. But I just don't want it to be construed that because you're in that meeting, you're somehow trying to get it to work. I think you're very eloquent in the reasoning why, and I appreciate that. So thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I would support that motion, but I do have a question. So the Heritage Resource Committee is, of course, also the committee that's tasked with doing sort of, I don't know, demolition investigations, I guess you want to call it that. And we didn't really talk about that too much, but I had brought that sort of to the attention of council, that we had a rather interesting MPC recently, and I think a large part of that was sort of blown up out of that role. And so I guess I wanted to ask Councillor Jacobson if perhaps that, you know, when we're talking about providing resources to this committee, could that somehow be snowballed in there that they're being tasked to assess these buildings for what exactly and based on what, with what kind of training, et cetera? Do you know what I'm trying to say? It seems like we're asking that committee to do a pretty big job, but it's, I don't know, to me, it's not really clear as to what they're being asked to do. So how are they supposed to base, on what criteria are they basing a recommendation to MPC as to not demo, you know, not to allow demolition or to allow demolition, et cetera, et cetera? That's a really complicated question, but I hope you can understand what I'm trying to get at there.
Oh, I understand.
Would you care to think about that for a while or answer?
No,
that's all, Councillor Jacobson?
I'm happy to chat about it.
So I guess what I'm saying too is I think your motion does sort of incorporate that as a consideration as well going forward, because I believe part of what you asked was to sort of look at the scope of what we're asking them to do. So anyway,
so what I can say that is in the past, whenever there, and so I've been on the board when there's been, including my time previous to council, probably 5 of these investigations. And I mean, they've always been relatively straightforward because usually there's a reason a building's going to be demolished. This last one was probably the most contentious, well, not contentious for the board, but the most interesting one because of reasons you all know. but I'll tell you, as a practical matter, operationally, what has always happened is it happens to be that I forget the official name, but it's the director of the Historical Society, the museum director. It's been one person, and she was replaced by another one. That person has always sat on this board, so that person de facto has a lot of expertise to go and at least assess it, certainly more than a normal board member would be. So I've often kind of thought that, you know, even just removing that responsibility from the Heritage Resources Committee and putting it into that person on the Historical Society is probably a better reflection of the technical training to make that assessment, period. You know, because you could certainly run into a situation down the road where you don't have that ability there. But aside from that, I think frankly the reason it was so contentious this time around is because this is the first time in the entire history, at least according to administration, of this board's existence, where they had a building that they didn't think should be demolished. So then they said, well, what should we do? And I said, well, and to be honest, I gotta lie, I was kind of responsible for you guys' troubles, because I said, well, you should do what you're supposed to do. You should, if you think it shouldn't be torn down, that's what you should say should happen, because that's what, you know, at the very least, you can get an opinion from the Municipal Planning Commission as to where they think this all fits. So that's what happened now. But I apologize, I should have maybe let you all know ahead of time, but I do agree completely that this has raised the issue that, you know, what's the process for all this? Where is the training for this? What is all this, period, right? So I give you a long answer. I think a very clearly defined discussion with the outcome being that there is a process for all that, you know, either within the scope of the Heritage Resources Committee or somewhere else in the city, needs to be an end product of this discussion. So I guess I should apologize to you guys.
No, I don't really know that an apology is in order, to be honest with you.
I mean,
given that this has only happened once in its existence, and certainly only once for the current Municipal Planning Commission, I didn't find it overly cumbersome. I was just, it was made clear by the commission at that time that the criteria given for this particular property were not sufficient for holding up that project, although it was delayed working cooperatively with the property owner. And I still remain hopeful that that was in the best interest of the community as a whole, and provided some opportunity for those interested to come forward and perhaps take the building in a different route than what it was slated for. So
I will say to that point too, wearing my other hat as a developer, having a very clearly defined process that can be also communicated to the applicant in those cases is always very beneficial, because even in this case, obviously it didn't hold things up. When you're an applicant or developer, it's always very scary when those things happen, frankly, right? So yeah, so having that process in place will be beneficial for all sides involved.
thank you. Councillor Goetz.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and that was my point. I think we do have a policy right now as far as designating these buildings as being historical, and it has to come from the owner, does it not?
Yes, for municipal designation, it has to come from the owner. Typically, those designations have always come first from the places of interest list that was generated by the steering committee in 2010. And that listed, I think, just about 110 properties within the city that were sort of places of interest, possible heritage significance within the community. I think that's one of the difficult parts of this most recent example you're talking about, is that if I recall, that property actually wasn't on the places of interest list. So there would be some question about whether it could have even achieved a municipal heritage designation had the owner applied for it, given that it had not previously been identified as having heritage significance.
And even if some of these homes were on a list, it's up to the owner to decide.
Correct, and not just homes.
So, no, in all kinds of buildings, right? I just want to make that clear that it's, like for us at MPC, I think it was fairly straightforward. And I think the builder was very generous to give the extension of time. That wasn't done by MPC. That was their own recommendation. In fact, originally 90 days and then 60 days. It was lowered to. So I think he was very generous to give that opportunity, but it wasn't imposed upon him by MPC.
Correct. Councillor Hibbs.
That might be very true, but then again, why were they bothering to do an assessment? Do you know what I mean? Like, again, I'll just go back to supporting the motion that's being made, that it does need a run through, it does need streamlining, it does need, it just needs to be clear.
But we don't need to talk about this.
We've had a fair bit of comment since the motion was made, so I would ask our legislative coordinator, Bill Bono, to reread the motion as it is currently.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I may need some clarification from Councillor Jacobson. I have on the floor for the motion that Council directs administration to consult with the Heritage Resource Committee regarding the scope of work and to remove the appointment of a council member.
Yeah, I think I said to consult the Heritage Resources Committee to determine, yeah, the scope of work is fine. I guess their future, yeah, that's fine. The purpose is understood.
The wording is okay with the
work purpose is understood.
Very good. Chief Gotti?
What I might suggest is that we would bring back a more focused review. We'll talk with the Heritage Resources Committee, and then we'll bring back a more focused review of bylaw 397, which defines things like membership and the roles and responsibilities, the objective of the committee. And that'll give council the opportunity to make those changes within the bylaw after we've brought some consultation from the committee themselves.
As far as the role clarity, but the appointment of the council member is still on this motion, though.
That's correct.
Yes, that I just point out that that will also require an amendment of bylaw 397, and so both things can be done during that
concurrently process. Very good. So we're all clear on that then? Is there any additional input to the motion before us? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And I do not believe there is any opposed. That is unanimously in favor. Anything additional at this time? Thank you, Director Juke.
Thank you, Mayor.
Are we sufficiently clear with the direction on those items contained in report number 4? She's out of here. I will pose that question to you.
Yes, we are. I am confident that we have a good understanding of council's direction on all 3 committees.
Thank you. Next up is our information section. And first up is under reports is our Chief Administrative Officer report. Chief Gotti?
And actually, for this particular meeting, I was more focused on my in-camera report, and I was unable to complete this one in time.
Understandable. Are there any items of interest that you care to touch on verbally, or prefer to wait until next meeting?
I can touch on a few items verbally.
Very good.
So one of the things that I normally report on, of course, is the coordination of the COVID response here in the community. So as of 4 o'clock today, of course, the province has announced that no move to phase 2 is forthcoming on March 1st, but that would be actually the earliest announcement of a move to phase 2 that they could foresee. So that does change our direction a little bit, because we had anticipated even just this afternoon that would go ahead. Cases here in the city of Lacome are down significantly actually over the last week. We're down to 16 cases, I believe, 16 active cases. And so that's a great direction to see. I believe that is all I would highlight on the COVID side. We have no recommendation to consider a declaration of state of local emergency. And we're certainly eagerly watching the province's announcements to see when we're going to be able to get back a little bit closer to normal. March 1st, we will be opening our pool for some specific lessons and activities that are allowed by the provincial regulations. And as of this week, we will have schools using the dry ice surface or the dry pads at the arena for things like broom ball and floor hockey, things like that.
Wonderful. I think that'll certainly make lots of citizens, especially parents, happy that both the pool March 1st and I think sooner than that, any day now, the North Arena surface, not the ice surface. But
yes,
the arena surface.
Just the dry pad.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Cuddy. In council mailbox, we've got a few items there from the administrative arm of AMA, the AMSC insurance letter to mayor and council. Given you sit on the finance committee for AMA, would you care to touch on the overall impacts of that, the consequences of that letter, Chief Cuddy?
Yes, I actually would. I'm just really pleased to see, and I did pass that on actually at the finance committee meeting as well, to see AUMA through AMSC making these changes and returning some of this to the members, returning some of these funds to the members. That is something that I've been passionate about since joining the AUMA board, is to see some of their cash holdings returned to the member municipalities. And not to say that I'm the reason this has happened by any stretch, but I think there has been a movement generally there to for this to happen. It's just great to see it happen. It's
certainly a cog in the wheel, and I know that this community, like I'm sure all the rest in the province, do appreciate that move. I guess on one hand, we can be happy that it's being returned to the appropriate location, or for some a little more cynical could suggest that the rates were a little exorbitant in the first place to have accumulated such a significant fund there, but it's a positive step in any event. Any additional input? 6.2B, the Alberta Infrastructure letter for the Safety Rest Area project that was received on February 9th.
So this is just a notification about the safety rest area that is planned on the west side of the city, about 8 kilometers north of Lacone, the Highway 12 interchange. It's on the southbound side of Highway 2. And you can see here that the province is accepting proposals for commercial development of a commercial safety rest area at that location. One thing that I did want to highlight to you, and I let Alberta Transportation know this as well, is that when you had your presentation from MLA Orr, one of the questions you had specifically asked was about the planned services at this location. And at that time, the stated objective of the province was that there would be no services, there would be no commercial services developed there. It would be simply parking and garbage cans. And so while I actually don't think it is a huge issue to have the development of this commercial rest area, I certainly wish it would work better in the city of Lacoma. But it is a change in direction from the information you received at your most recent presentation. So I just wanted to highlight that for you.
Thank you, Chief Cuddy. I think it's been a little polite saying a change in direction that is diametrically opposite to what was presented to us, which is unfortunate. I think it's important that we have a rest area for everyone to utilize on that particular direction lane. I just think that it lacks foresight to put it in the location, I guess I'm going to say as known as the former Juniper area, so that people can put it in context. When a rather short distance, a few miles down the road, that we've got a commercial development, on both sides of the road in the county and the city, And quite frankly, either side would be preferable to that location. I made that known at the last IDP meeting. It was certainly not an excuse to try and garner any kind of development away from the county and suggest it goes in the city. Quite frankly, if it was on the east side of the road, I still think that's a far better location. I think it was presented as a cost-saving measure, and I'm sure there's reasons, but if that's if that is the reason, I find it quite laughable, because the land cost is insignificant compared to the overall development cost. And if in fact they do have to do a highway bridge over whatever, over the I don't know what to call it.
Metric reconfiguration.
That will cost so much more than any land acquisitions cost, that it'll pale in comparison. But in any event, I don't think it's a great move. Actually, it's a good move. It's not a great location. Councillor Conick.
Yeah, it just, to me, it boggles my mind why they wouldn't choose a location that you can access both north and south, and like just one, just southbound. It's just down, like you say, down the road, just one of these decisions.
And in an area with no water or sewer.
No, we have water and sewer, like you say, on the east and west side.
Yeah.
It's stupid.
In any event, we do have it in writing. Anything additional on that item? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. It does invite us to arrange a meeting or contact him. Do we want to send one more official or a true official response to this letter that expresses exactly what you expressed? I know.
I would be more than happy to craft a letter in response. I think that it would, it may fall on deaf ears, but I would be happy to do so.
I think it would be more foolish to not respond at all.
Okay.
I still think it should be stated somehow officially where we stand, because if they afterwards said, well, you never did actually say anything officially in response to this letter, I think that would be unusual.
Chief Gotti and I discussed that was one side of the coin, and yeah, I'm happy to do so if you'd like to see that for the reasons outlined.
I would like to have a response.
I think so.
Yeah,
That is reasonable. Seems to be, most council seems to be outside of that.
I think one of the things is to express the concern about excess costs being involved with this other location compared to a location at on the west end of our community. Because I think our taxpayers, not city taxpayers, but taxpayers in general should be aware that this is going to cost a lot more by going up there than it is here, and only serving one side of the road.
Fair enough. We will do so. And item 6.3 from our boards, committees, and commissions from December 16th, the Municipal Planning Commission minutes. We already had an opportunity to review those. Councillor Hoekstra?
Sorry, we missed Communities in Bloom letter.
My apologies, we did so. We will hold our input on the MPC one and move back to item 6.2.c, Communities in Bloom and COVID letter on February 12th. Was there a specific item
Well,
on
I was curious if there was any appetite in the community for this, because times have changed drastically, and people are gardening, they're outdoors, they're doing all kinds of things. I personally can't attend the webinars, but is someone going to attend the webinars on our behalf and investigate this? Unless there's no spirit in the room to, because it doesn't cost tons, right?
I don't know about, it definitely does cost, because I think the city is expected to follow suit in the public areas and enhance them as well. Generally speaking, this type of thing is community driven as opposed to municipality driven to the community. But if you would like some more information or
But does the
perhaps,
community know?
right, or perhaps reach out to community members to see if they'd want to be involved. That might be something that we could sort of consider. Chief Gotti?
I was just going to say that actually, I myself have not been involved in Communities in Bloom, but we've had a number of staff here who have. And they expressed quite a bit of concern when they saw this letter even appearing on council's agenda because of their past experience with cost and an expectation of municipal participation that is apparently quite resource intensive. So it's not to say we couldn't do it, but the input I have received from people who have participated in the past is that it requires a lot of planning and commitment from the municipality to do a good job. And if you're not going to resource it that way, then it's kind of counterproductive to driving municipal pride.
So if it's all possible, just for some of those webinars to make sure that we're up to date with the changes, if someone could, with past experience, you know, what changes are being considered, that would be of interest to council.
We will have someone attend.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next up then, back to item 6.3.a, the Municipal Planning Commission minutes from December 16th. Any questions or concerns with those minutes? And then after that is the Lacone Police Commission minutes from January 21st. So a recent meeting. Anything you care to highlight with that, Councillor Connick? Very good. Seeing no hands up, we will move into councillor reports. I have nothing at this time. Councillor Gullickson.
The only thing I had was the Municipal Planning Commission, and I think we've discussed that enough.
Good. Councillor Hoekstra.
My report is there, but I just wanted to say publicly that I was blessed with another grandchild on the weekend, and that's happy COVID news because, yeah, babies are wonderful.
Any positive news at this time is certainly welcome. Congratulations. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. As I alluded to earlier in discussion with Culture and Tourism, the coordinator position is posted publicly. So if there's anybody seeking a possible opportunity, that would be greatly appreciated if they want to bring forth their resume.
Thank you. Councillor Jacobson.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Just one thing, that I attended the sod turning for Father Lacoma School the other day, or snow turning rather. It's unfortunate that in COVID times, of course, things have to be pared back so strongly. So it was obviously not attended by any public. There was no students there. It was just the minimal amount of, people that were there. But it is obviously a really special day for the community, for both the Father Lacoma community and the community at large. And it is meant to be, it was originally meant to be a modernization, now is essentially a full rebuild. And because of that, it's probably going to be about a 3-year process. So it's going to be lengthy, but it's going to be fantastic for the community when it is done. So that's what I wanted to mention.
It's certainly a lengthier program, but certainly be a worthwhile project when it's completed. I think that even though the public was not perhaps there in attendance, there was certainly lots of questions arise. I had a few phone calls, what was going on there, what was happening, whatnot. So obviously people were paying attention and are both interested in what was happening and hopeful for the success of the project. So thank you for mentioning that. Councillor Connick?
No, sir.
Thank you. Anyone care to make their favorite motion? Councillor Gullickson.
I'll move that we move in camera.
Which is.
Oh, no, sorry, wrong one. I'll move that we accept the information as information.
Very good, thank you.
Then I'll do the other one.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Our minutes minutes from the last regular council meeting of February 8th are in the package before you. I'm sure everybody's had an opportunity to review them, and we have any revisions or additions to be considered? Councillor Hibbs?
I'll move that the meeting minutes be accepted as presented.
Thank you very much. Anyone? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. We have no notices of motion this evening. Before consideration of the number 9 item for public consumption, we have our next meetings listed here. A council committee meeting for Monday, March 1st at 6 p.m. So 1 hour later, 6 p.m. And then a regular council meeting at our regular time of 5 p.m. on Monday, March the 8th. And then again, same time, 5 p.m. on March 22nd. The council committee meeting on March 1st is going to primarily revolve around what subjects, Chief Gotti?
The utility bylaw, as well as an update on some of the solid waste recommendations that you received and endorsed last year.
Thank you very much. Now, we may have had a hint of a motion to come.
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Gullickson.
Now I'm ready. See, I'm too busy reading stuff. I'll move that we move in camera.
Thank you very much. Let the record reflect that the motion to move in camera was made at 6:54.